Okay guys, this is the review video for the Unit 5 exam. Alright, so let's get started. The first thing that we are going to take a look at is going to be the difference between debt, deficits, and what that works. So remember that the deficit is simply the difference between government spending, or I should say taxes, alright, minus spending. And if that's a negative, then we're in a deficit. If for some reason that's a positive, if we take in more money than we actually spend, then we would be running what's called a surplus. Right there. The debt is just the accumulation, just all the money that we owe. And when I say we, I mean our government. Alright? So just remember those vocabulary words and everything, and that'll help you with certain things. Alright, when it comes to the money market and aggregate demand, aggregate supply graph, remember expansionary monetary policy. Alright, which we do it on a money market graph as the money supply shifting to the right. With that we have a lower interest rate equals an increase in investment and consumer spending, which this right here is what leads to an increase in aggregate demand. Alright, so when investment and consumer spending increase, then that leads to an increase in aggregate demand, which closes the recessionary gap. That's why typically the Federal Reserve will do expansionary monetary policy during a recession to encourage people to spend and borrow more money, shifts aggregate demand, closing that gap. If we were to do contractionary, then literally the exact opposite would be the case. And I apologize for the sudden shift in how the screen might look. Technical error, so we'll just roll with it here. Alright. Remember, contractionary is literally just going to be the exact opposite of what we just did with expansionary, where you have a decrease in the money supply, which increases the interest rate, which decreases aggregate demand, will be typically used during an inflationary period because that lowers investment and consumer spending. Alright. Now, next up, once again, more technical stuff, sorry about that. Next up, we're going to talk about the Phillips curve. Remember, the Phillips curve shows us the relationship between, especially in the short run, the inflation rate and the unemployment rate. Remember, they have an inverse relationship. So when unemployment increases, the inflation rate drops. When unemployment decreases, the inflation rate will increase. Alright, so if the question just asks you to draw the short run Phillips curve, that's it. If they want the long run and the short run, then that's the case. Remember, the long run Phillips curve shows us the natural rate of unemployment. So whatever that number is, that'll be the long-run Phillips curve. That is the only thing that will shift the long-run Phillips curve. Everything else will deal with the short run Phillips curve, okay? But it's there. Now, just because they cross right here does not mean that this is the starting point. Also, that is a big thing that I understand where the confusion comes from, but that does not mean that's the starting point. That just means that theoretically, if we were in long run equilibrium, then then we would be at our target inflation rate and at our natural rate of unemployment. Okay, so if, for example, the question says we start off in a recession, we would label that right there as point A. If they said we start off in an inflationary period, we would label that as point B, right, and so on and so forth. Now remember, movements are caused by shifts in aggregate demand. Alright, a shift of the short run Phillips curve, remember, is caused by a shift in short run aggregate supply. Also, just know inflationary expectations can cause those things as well. Alright? Okay, remember long-run economic growth, those are like big changes in the economy. We're talking about either a shift in the long-run aggregate supply or the production possibility curve outwards, so it's going to be caused by a change in technology, change in quantity or quality of resources only. Short-run fluctuations deal with changes in aggregate demand or short-run aggregate supply. That's not the long-run potential of the economy, all right? When it comes to trade deficit versus surplus, remember, trade deficit is simply importing more than we export. Alright, a trade surplus is exporting more than we import. Remember, anything that deals with the current account deals with goods and services. Anything that's on the financial account is financial products moving in and out of the economy. Financial products include things like stocks, bonds, money itself, all right, any of that stuff. When it comes to the foreign exchange graph, remember the four rules of Forex, all right, which are bottom, bottom, all right, figure out which currency they're talking about, all right, then you're going to shift the opposite curve on the opposite graph in the same direction. Forgot to finish this. All right, last, you should have one currency appreciate and one currency depreciate. Okay, you should know how the graph works, so I'm not going to go through, drawing and showing you all that stuff. I guess I'll draw you one just so you know again how it's labeled and everything, but that should be pretty straightforward. Alright, so remember we're comparing the US dollar to the Canadian dollar. Alright, bottom, bottom. Right there. This shows us the exchange rate. Right there. Alright, so we got ER1 and Q1 right there. Okay? Now, also, remember that in economics, most of the problems are going to go a little something like this. You're going to have a situation that comes up. Something will happen. They will tell you something changes within the given problem set. Then you need to figure out how that impacts the situation that had been going on above. Let me go ahead and answer for you guys the FRQ problem on the review as well. Alright, so 1 part A, draw an aggregate demand, aggregate supply for an economy where the unemployment rate is above the natural rate. So that tells you right there that we are in a recession. Right there. B, draw a Phillips curve that shows the current state of the economy. I'm just going to simplify this here. Make sure you write this out there. Alright. So that point A shows the current state of the economy. C, would the Federal Reserve target a lower or higher federal funds rate? They would target a lower one. That would look like this on the money market graph. And we're going to pretend like that's perfectly drawn. Money supply 2. Right there. Alright, and then show the effect of this change on graph in part A right there. Alright. So, if you have all that, you got it correct. If you have any questions, write them down, ask them before class starts, before the test starts. Have a good rest of your day.